Good afternoon. This is a forum that is being presented by the members of the Academic Program and Administrative Services Task Force on Prioritization, which is a part of a commitment that we made when we began this process, that we would provide continued and consistent dialogue and feedback with the university community, so that you would be aware of all of the things that we were doing. We have also structured this such that we can get your feedback throughout the process, and this is just one of the mechanisms that we are using for that purpose. We are also streaming this live for those individuals who obviously during the summer had already made commitments, couldn't be here, but we again are doing everything we can to ensure that as many people within the UM community have an opportunity to get engaged with us. We've done, I guess this will be about the 5th forum that we've had, and the way we do this is we have asked the individuals who are members of the task force to really be the one to interface with you, because they're really doing the heavy lifting. And you now have access to some documents that are in final stages, and I'll kind of open it up in just a minute, but we have several documents that the task force has reviewed, and we're seeking kind of your final comments before those documents be basically put aside as final documents, which we will use in this process. And then we have other documents that we're in various stages of sharing with you. So it's a dynamic process, and it could get a bit confusing, but it's a again, we have members of the task force here front and center. We also have members of the task force out in the audience, and I'd ask you to raise your hand if you're a member of the task force or serving in an ex officio role as well. Put your hand, task force member? Okay. So, as I said, the way we've done this in the past, and I'm open if we want to do it a little differently and maybe have any comments on the front end, but what we did before was you have had an opportunity to review some documents and to see where we are and read our updates and other things, and so we can use this simply to let you ask questions for clarification or make comments, and kind of take that as the approach that's probably most useful for you. So having said that, I'll simply open it up to your comments and questions. It's okay, the live stream is now working. We do have microphones, and so when you have a question, if you would raise your hand, I'm going to give this back to Dawn, because I'm really just going to be facilitating questions, unless, of course, it's a question that you need to raise with me. I'll be happy to answer it, but the questions is the work of the task force. And we ask that you indicate your name so that we can follow up if necessary with you if you have a question in that capacity. We also did invite some written questions, and I think we only received one, and while we're navigating this, I'll take a look at that question and kind of see how to facilitate getting a response to that individual here and or through follow-up. So having said that, okay. Introductions. I'll let the task force members introduce themselves.
Andrew Ware, Department of Physics and Astronomy and Computer Science.
Rosalind Haley, UMPD and Equal Opportunity.
Anissa Ricci, student.
Jen Zelmer Quaresma, Athletic Academic Services, and I am on the criteria committee within this task force.
John DeBoer, theater. Chase Greenfield, I'm a student studying English literature and philosophy, and I co-chair the framework subcommittee with Professor DeBoer.
Liz Putnam from pharmacy.
Ona Renner Fahey from the Department of Modern and Classical Languages and Literatures.
Okay, thank you. We have some task force members out in the audience, but I'm just going to let you go incognito right now, let your colleagues take the heat here, if you will. But having said that, let me now open it up for comments, questions, and if you would just raise your hand, I'll recognize you.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Nicholas von Essen. I'm in mathematical sciences. I have two questions, I guess, and a more important item. The unit of analysis, as far as I'm not quite sure I understand that correctly. It lists undergraduate degrees, and graduate degrees. If a department offers various undergraduate degrees, and including options and minors, will each of these be evaluated separately, or will all the undergraduate degrees be evaluated as a combined item?
So we've made the choice to look at not each individual option, but if it's say a bachelor BA in mathematics, we look at that as one. And we'll look at the data for all the options, but we'll evaluate it as one degree.
So the department would submit one report for, in the case of the math department, one report for the BA in mathematics, including all options, one report for the minor.
No.
No.
The minor will be, unless it's a standalone minor, if it's a minor in mathematics,
Yeah.
it makes sense to include it with the
Okay.
BA in mathematics.
Okay, thank you. Then the next question I have is about the ranking categories. It was my understanding that all departments will be ranked maybe in quintiles, the lowest performing 20%, the next 20% until the best 20%. That seemed to be what I originally understood. But now I see that there are 5 ranking categories. From the best is highly effective, the worst is urgent action needed. And I'm wondering if there are percentages assigned to these categories, or if, for example, it could be that, say, 50% of all programs fit into the satisfactory category.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we sort of eliminated the idea of quintiles, and they're now ranking categories, and there's no required percentage associated with any of them. There will be cutoffs, but those will be determined after we've received all of the forms from each program and unit.
Okay, thank you. And then I finally have a question about Faculty Senate. Faculty Senate passed a resolution that it should have a vote on the final recommendations, and that is, I believe, based on the CBA. According to the CBA, Faculty Senate has the right to review and make recommendations concerning, for example, discontinuance or reorganization of academic programs. The APASP task force certainly makes recommendations which will presumably include such things. And so it would seem that before any final decisions are made at the university level, that Faculty Senate should have the right to vote on it. It's just a recommendation Faculty Senate makes, but I did not see this on the timeline. The final report is November 30th, I believe, and the next Faculty Senate meeting, I believe, is December 7th, so that would not be kind of an undue delay, it seems to me, but it seems that Faculty Senate really has the right to speak on it and vote on it before then final decisions are made by the President and the Cabinet. And
I'll pick that one up. Nicholas, there is, in the most recent version of the timeline, it may not explicitly state Faculty Senate. Does it? Where is that one? So shared governance senates will be given the period from December 4th through December 8th to make recommendations or whatever actions they want to take based on the final report. So it's not strictly adhering to the original resolution we passed, which gave a November timeline so that we could, I think we originally wanted it to go through 2 meetings with a month in between, but when the deadlines got pushed back to accommodate people coming back from the summer, we had to condense the recommendation and feedback time for the shared governance bodies. So it's still in there. And then I believe we've also built in, after the president's final prioritization decisions would come in on December 11th, she's also going to give a 3-day window for responses to that final decision before the December 15th end date. Yeah, you have a follow-up there, Nicholas? You're shifting in your seat.
Yes, thank you. It just seems to me these response periods are really, really short, and a 3-day response period somehow gives the impression that one has a response period pro forma and that nothing is really gonna change. There is not much time for a department or program to make a case on anything, and there is not much time to review anything. And since, you know, if you want to save one program, you have to then presumably cut another one. So it would seem there would be significant deliberation needed, and three days seems pro forma.
Can I just respond to that, Nicholas? So one thing is this report makes recommendations, and then if the president chooses which of those to act upon, and then it still has to go through, if they're going to, any program is going to be put into moratorium, anything like that, still has to go through the appropriate review through faculty senate and all that. So there's not, it's not cutting off any of that part of the process. It is, those 5 days, which is short, everything is short in this process, but for a response on the report as a whole.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that as well. We acknowledge that there are short response periods, and we acknowledge that most of the process is condensed. Say authorship, we would love to give you guys an extra week if we could. The framework subcommittee deliberated for, no joke, weeks on this to make the best timeline possible, and that's why we're telling you all now about the timeline. We know it's going to be short. We acknowledge that. We don't love it either, but this is what we have to do if we're going to make this work before fiscal year 19.
Hi, guys. First of all, I want to say how much I appreciate the openness with which you've approached this process, the transparency you've demonstrated thus far. But I do have still a couple questions, just two. One has to do with the categories that are outlined, the highly effective, satisfactory, modification required, urgent action required categories that you've outlined. Dickinson oftentimes outlines quintiles, where it's just you're grouping them by 20% chunks. Is that the same? Are these quintiles, or are these different? And will there be numerical equivalents placed on each of those so that, you know, if you get above a certain number, below a certain number, you end up in one of these? Or, because these seem a little bit more than just numerical, right? There's sort of a qualitative judgment to them.
Right, so the reason we are choosing to go with ranking categories is so we don't have to squeeze 20% of our programs into moratorium when likely 20% of our programs do not belong in that ranking category, just like there probably aren't 20% of programs that are exceptional. So as of right now, there are no, there's no cutoff number for each ranking category because we haven't received the forms back and we haven't scored them. So we're still deliberating on that. But the reason we moved to ranking categories is so that they don't have to have 20% of all of our programs or units in them.
Thanks for that. And the other question I have has to do with after APASP has prepared its recommendations, they go to the cabinet, is my understanding, for some kind of decision based on some kind of priorities set by the president. What assurances have you made that the recommendations and the rankings that you put forward are actually in any way implemented? And what should we as the university be requesting from our president if that's what needs to happen?
Well, let me start, and then obviously this has been a question that APASP has asked, and indeed it was one of the frequently asked questions that we responded to, and I think I would refer you to the more complete delineation of a response to that. But the substance of it is that throughout this process at the cabinet and presidential level, we will be using the same parameters, same consideration of criteria, metrics, and all of that, so that decisions made follow that track. Obviously, the president has the authority to make different decisions based on her feedback and analysis with the cabinet, but the expectation is that it will follow through with the same pattern of analysis used throughout this process. You all may have some additional.
I just, now speaking not as a committee member or as a task force member, but as a faculty member, I think that I would appreciate as a member of the community that the parameters that you spoke of that are going to be used by the cabinet in implementation be something that's made available as you're working on them. And so if they are just our framework, great, but.
That's what I meant. The
Yeah,
parameters within the context is if you look in the framework document, there's a section called parameters. So those are the same things. So there's been no discussion, there's no expectation that the cabinet will come up with a set of parameters that will not be, first of all, consistent with what we've already done. And if there is anything that would be such, it would be made available to APASP first and foremost, but then obviously to the broader community.
Well, and that's the one thing that, because I did note that the parameters have changed in the framework document to move away from a strict quota or 18-to-1 target to what's, I think it says appropriate faculty numbers for the number of students we have. And so it's just, I'm glad to hear that, but those parameters remain, as a faculty member, somewhat troublingly vague.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Noted.
yielding to what the work of the task force did in taking the original framework document and modifying it so that those kinds of issues would be addressed, and there's no concern there.
I'm Corey Cleveland, Ecosystem and Conservation Sciences. I guess I wondered, when the next draft or version of the metrics is released, will there be an opportunity to provide feedback on that, or is the next iteration of that going to be the final set of metrics?
Great question. Actually, we're hoping to have that out by next week on some of the metrics and some of the criteria and rubrics. It's not going to be complete, but we're hoping that we're going to be in detail. We've been deliberating all the way up till this morning, the meeting right before now, so that will be included. And then from the time period of July 6th, I believe, until July 30th, we're expecting and hoping for feedback from everybody on that, because this is our first draft of all of that information. So good question.
So then there would be a final.
Yes, and that will go out when we request the final reports in August to be when we request for people to start submitting those, that will be the final document. So we'll take that feedback for the month of July into consideration, making adjustments, and then the pilot process, and then submit that as final.
Hi, thanks. Maria Mangold, College of Humanities and Sciences. On the timeline, there's 2 separate bullet points for a list of all programs and services to be reviewed. One was on May 2nd, and then the other one is between June 30th, or between June 1st and June 30th. Will the list of programs be released at the same time in tandem with the criteria and metrics so that people actually know what we're talking about? Like, what is for example, an administrative service? That would be super helpful, just in my opinion, so that we could actually have an opinion on the metrics and criteria.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, we're trying to have all the complete list of the academic programs as well as administrative services by June 30th. But again, that's our best list. Maybe some then member of the campus community says, what about this program which you forgot? And we'll allow for the changes of that as well. But we want to get that out to the campus community for feedback on that as well. So we've been going through this process. We've been getting feedback from on the administrative services side, the sector heads. On the academic side, we've been getting feedback from the deans. So, and then when we have the list that is complete as we can make it, we'll release it to the campus community for their feedback as well.
Thanks for catching that. That's just a typo in the timeline. We moved that date all the way till the June 30th. So as Professor Ware has already indicated, we'll be sending that out as soon as we have it.
While we wait for other questions, we did get one written, thank you. We did get one written question, and it has to do with metrics. So, Andrew, if you read the, would you indicate who it came from, too?
Sure. This is from Mark Hebelwhite, an associate professor in the wildlife biology program. And there's a number of justification, but the question in the end is, I'll read this. My basic question to the campus forums is, will the APASP include metrics of research and creative scholarship or not in their APASP review? And if so, how will they develop criteria to do so? So the answer is yes, we will include metrics of research and creative scholarship, and we will look at both some quantitative data as well as some qualitative. And this is essential in our review process to take into account that important part of what we do as in our work here. The challenge, of course, is always doing this across different disciplines, where some have very creative endeavors, and that's part of their mission, part of their program, and others have research as part of their mission and need to evaluate that. So we've been discussing ways we can both analyze that qualitatively as well as quantitatively, and this is an important to address.
Erin Bauckham, library. Along that same line, will there be metrics about service? Because I'm just going through everything that we as faculty do, and we do a lot of service.
Yes, there is again, since that's hard to quantify, there's a qualitative in terms of service and outreach in terms of that activity, yes.
Lori Young, Society and Conservation in the College of Forestry and Conservation. Circling back to the research metrics, I really appreciate that you're thinking about a range of qualitative and quantitative metrics. And one of the things I appreciated about the draft metrics was that you tried to have a range of metrics for each of the sort of areas of evaluation. And I would really encourage the task force and the metrics committee to think really carefully about having a range of quantitative metrics in the research category that can represent the range of scholarship, creative scholarship, and research on campus, and not to shy away from any particular metrics, in particular grant dollars or number of publications, which for some of us are really, really important metrics of productivity, and obviously for others they're not. So I guess just as teaching and other arenas are represented by a range of metrics, both quantitative and qualitative, my hope is that we'd see the same thing in research, so that those of us who are in the sciences have the opportunity to represent our productivity.
Anyone else?
Okay.
My question is related to the parameters. I understand that one of the indicators will be the most current version of the university strategic vision, and I know that there have been subcommittees that have been meeting and drafting strategic opportunity indicators, but we haven't seen any final outcome of those subcommittee documents, and I'm wondering the level of granularity that the APASP group is going to be expecting in response to documents which may not be yet available or may not have yet been reviewed.
I'll give you this update at least. I just got sent today a draft of some of the work from the SBCC in terms of some of their granularity and looking at how they would measure various things that contribute to the various goals in that document. So I'm hoping that they'll have some drafts out by the time we start at least our pilot process. But that's not something that we're working on. They've sent it to us just as for comment as APASP members giving feedback to the SBCC.
And I'm just going to be a little blunt out there and say that we struggled with that at the beginning, especially in criteria and metrics. Actually, the whole task force struggled with how we were supposed to put these two things together. So within the criteria, we have, there's a question specifically asking for the contributions and your information, qualitative information related to the strategic plan that we have in place. And then we are also asking for how are you contributing to the strategic 2020 strategic vision, or the strategic vision as well. So we are trying to incorporate both of those, but yes, it is a bit difficult for us, and I'll be honest with you and say that we are looking for something tangible from the SPCC to do that. But we have been pulling together and saying that those two documents are extremely important to the university. We do need to recognize and honor what we have right now, and we need to recognize and honor what the SPCC is bringing forward as our vision and putting those two together, and so I think they're both an important part of the process.
The UM 2020 document will appear in the first criteria in terms of your response to it. It'll appear there, and you'll respond to certain values or certain aspects of it if you're filling out a form. And then the last criteria, opportunity analysis, will be where the new strategic vision and plan will be included in the criteria, so you'll have an opportunity to respond to that there. So they appear in two separate portions of the criteria. They will appear in two separate portions of the form, and your response to them will be qualitative, and there'll be like a word limit for your response. So that's how they'll be implemented in terms of your response and how they will kind of shake out for you.
My question, I'm Julie Walter in the Communicative Sciences and Disorders program, and I'm not sure quite how to phrase this question, and it might be more of a comment or food for thought. I have heard recently from my dean that there is some discussion about any of the professional programs that have more clinical pieces within their programs and have a clinic that they actually house for purposes of training, which we do in our program, that there has been some discussion as to whether or how to categorize those pieces as an administrative piece versus an academic program. Perhaps I'm correct. I'm even looking for confirmation if that's some of the discussion. And I guess one of my comments or questions for, again, that food for thought is, has there been some thought about mission as to how to define whether it's an administrative unit or more of an academic unit? And the reason I say that is, for example, a clinic, which in our case we have a very active speech language hearing clinic that serves the community, but the mission of that clinic is to be a student training program first. And the only reason it's there is to provide, not the only, we do a lot of other wonderful things, but the primary mission is to serve our students. And so I think from an administrative perspective, all of the pieces of a clinical program are completely tied to the academic trilogy that you think of from a more traditional academic program. And so I just put that forward as, again, food for thought, or I'm sure you've thought a lot about this, and I'm just wondering if there has been any resolution or if there is more discussion that's needed around that piece.
So this is something we have talked a lot about, and the chair of the subcommittee on units and metrics is actually Chris Fiore, who has a lot of experience with this in psychology, with the same thing. And then what we want to make sure is that everything is included, in this way, that it included in one of the units of analysis, either on the academic side or the administrative side. We want to make sure it appears somewhere. And if we get it wrong, if you think we're putting you in terms of on the administrative side, you want to be evaluated on the academic side, there's always that opportunity to switch. What we wanted to make sure as a task force is we didn't exclude anybody. We want to make sure that everything that uses resources on campus is included in one of our units analysis, so that we're looking at everything across the board. But we will take feedback because, for example, one of the things we decided to do is, as a department offices will be evaluated on the administrative side, because that's kind of the business side, whereas the degree programs are what's evaluated on the academic side. So there's Some things which will appear that might seem like they should be on both, but we kind of try to break down, this is the administrative side and this is the academic side.
I really appreciate that, and having, I laugh because I swear I didn't bring it here, but I just came from another university where we went through an academic prioritization process, and I was a big part of writing those reports. And I do appreciate that you've thought about the load, and then again, that we could choose where our best fit is as appropriate. And with that, I'm going to put a big target on my head, but I really would like to be part of that pilot program. We, as in speech-language pathology, we have the largest, by far, clinic on campus, and I think that that might be a piece that would be a really important thing to be clarifying. And so I put, as chair of the Department of Speech-Language Pathology, or Communicative Sciences and Disorders, I put my name out there as that pilot individual.
Thank you for volunteering. So here's a little bit about the pilots for those of you in the framework document. You're all invited to participate in the pilot if you wish. And if you're interested, just send an email with some basic information listed on the APASP website to Rebecca Power. We're collecting a list of programs and services that are interested in that. We're going to be asking all volunteers who want to participate to fill out forms and help us make that process as the best it can possibly be. And then as far as actual review of programs and services, we're going to be randomly selecting those so that no one is given any special privileges, no one is getting any feedback from these. They're treated equally. The only purpose of taking some select programs and services for the pilots for review. It's that way we can test the review process and make sure that that does not have any major barriers before we jump into the formal finalized review with hundreds of reports. So everyone's encouraged and welcome to volunteer. You won't be notified if you're selected to be a process a program or service that will be incorporated into the review process pilot, but you will be allowed to give us feedback, and we encourage that. So help us make it the best it can be.
Lisa Eby, I'm in the Department of Ecosystem and Conservation Sciences. There seemed to be some discussion about whether similar BS or BA programs should be evaluated as a single program. As someone who teaches in forestry and contributes to different programs, that would make us writing these reports and metrics a lot easier. But at the same time, they are different majors and they have learning outcomes that are different. I'm just wondering, given the goal of program prioritization, I'm not really sure what the goal behind lumping programs would be for us, other than ease of ability to deal with the reporting and the metrics. But I also don't want us to imply that we have majors that are doing the exact same thing. Do you guys have any comments on when we should lump and we shouldn't lump?
I think we were looking for more in terms of lumping things like if a program offers a BA and a BFA in the exact same thing, should those be evaluated together? If a program offers a BA and a BS, so for example, a BA in chemistry and a BS in chemistry, should those be evaluated together? It's really very similar. We're not looking for two differently named BAs to be lumped together. We're looking at, for the exact same courses, this one adds maybe 2 more courses than the previous one, then those can be evaluated together.
Great, thank you. I have one more quick question about...
Real quick, it's about resources too. If you've got 2 programs that one might have more classes involved, then there are more those resources are shared for the most part, and so they can be lumped together. If 2 programs share resources, is really the way to think about it.
Okay. What about non-terminal masters? So, for example, many of our wildlife biology has a PhD and a master's. Do you want those lumped together?
That was the other thing we asked the deans, is if it's to tell us which are non-terminal masters. Some PhD programs, for example, have they give a master's along the way, but they don't admit anybody to the master's program. And so that's a non-terminal master's. Those would be evaluated with the PhD program.
What if you can get a terminal master's or a terminal PhD?
So if you typically if you admit students to the master's program, then that will be evaluated separately.
Thanks.
We have a long list. Scott, somebody get Scott a mic.
I think you might have left an impression with Julie that I'm not sure the committee's decided, because I think you were left with the impression that the program's going to get to decide whether or not the clinic should be included or not, and I don't know that that's what we think.
Not whether it should be included, but they can make if we put it on the academic side and they say, no, it should be evaluated on the administrative side or vice versa, they can ask the task force to be moved from one side to the other. We want to make sure everything is included somewhere. We will take feedback on, oh, no, you put it here, it should be in this one.
This is a multi-part question. The first question is, I'm assuming that you are planning to quantify the qualitative information in some way to then put it into the sort of weighting. Is that correct? Okay. And then has the task force thought carefully about how you're going to do that and ensure that if there are multiple people who are quantifying that qualitative information, you have what we call inter-rater reliability, so that programs are not, ranked higher or lower because the particular raters who evaluated them sort of see those categories differently. And some of us submitted detailed comments on how you might do this.
So yes, we have just created a procedure for how these evaluations of the reports are going to go. And that will be up in the, it's kind of difficult to talk about it without you having something in front of you. So that's going to be put up on the website as soon as possible. We have a communications update that will be posted, I believe, next week, early next week, so that people can see if anybody's familiar with an NIH review process for grants, it's going to be similar to that. So we welcome your feedback on that. Once again, that procedure is going to be tested in our piloting process as well. So if you have comments before we evaluate the pilots, or if you're not going to get any feedback, but we will definitely figure things out as we evaluate the pilots. What are tweaks that may need, or is this working? Looking at, as we have Chris Fiore, who's made us conscious of inter-rater variability issues, and we will be addressing all that and looking at it. But we really will welcome your feedback on the evaluation process moving forward.
Thank you.
To kind of address the first part of your question, we'll have a rubric for each of the individual metrics we are assigning a rank to within each category, and then we'll also have a rubric for the category as a whole. So that'll kind of address both the individual metrics and it as a whole, but so that's how we'll rank the qualitative questions in a quantitative way.
Just a question, are the programs going to see the rubric so they know what to put in the quantitative? Okay, just making sure.
Yes, all that's going to go out into the communication, and in July you can provide feedback as well about that information that we're sharing.
It is helpful to know what we're going to be looking for before you answer the questions, isn't it?
And just remember, there's also going to be training sessions on how to fill these things out in August, so at the end of August when we start. So you will know what we're specifically looking for in those documents, because they will be official the first part of August, once we've received all the feedback.
I probably don't need a microphone. Nathan Dimitrovich, when in August, by chance, will that happen timely enough for us to attend a orientation activity and everything, to attend those trainings?
So really quickly as well, there will be trainings prior to the pilot as well that are open to anyone, whether they want to participate or not. So keep that in mind, that those will be happening in the first couple of weeks of July as well. They'll be substantially reviewed and changed as the pilot process is finished, but they're also, I believe, right around the 28th of August is when we'll start those trainings. And then they'll range until the first week of September, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, August 21st. Actually, the trainings are going to begin August 21st in the anticipation or hope that the majority of the people who will be responsible for the academic services reports will be eager beavers and ready to get that training done and out of the way, so that we do have room for all the people from the academic programs who are going to be responsible for writing the reports to have training in small enough sessions that they can get their questions answered. So the range that we've proposed is from August 21st through September 5th.
That's in the framework, so that's in the framework document that is out now, so you can take a look at that, you'll see that in there.
The training's going to be separate from academic and administrative then, so there's specifics, so on the administrative side, we don't have to sit through the academic part of it.
The question is the training going to be separate?
I think we need to use the mics for the camera, for the people watching at home.
Are there going to be separate trainings for the administrative services side and the academic side? So we don't have to sit through each other's portions of that?
We're in the process of working that out at the moment, I think is the short answer. We'll let you know.
I'm writing it down.
So much. Kevin Bell, I'm in the School of Art, and my question is about, we're developing these reports, and I know you're still trying to figure out about who you are reporting to. Like, do these go through the dean, through our dean, and then on to you? And should we be working in collaboration with the dean at this point then to make these? I'm just wondering about the nature of that relationship and how all that works, and just so we can strategize and figure out our best way to approach it there.
On the framework and on the timeline, one thing that is suggested for academic programs is the second you get back, you have a prioritization retreat so that all faculty and staff in a program have the opportunity to see the forum, weigh in, and start working on it. Unit heads, so chairs and directors, will have the chance to write their reports, and we are still fleshing out how the deans will have input on the report. They will definitely be a part of the process, but that hasn't been spelled out quite yet.
Right, and to just reiterate, the expectation is that the individuals in the academic programs will be taking leadership in preparing the reports. The deans, and same for the administrative units, the deans and sector heads will work collaboratively with them, but the onus of that really rests at the unit level. And then the question that is still not quite resolved is then, once those reports have come forward to the unit head, what is the specific role that, in that process, that APASP will expect of those individuals? So I want to be real clear that the collaborative nature of it, and to answer your question about collaboration, will start at the ground level with the development of a response to the reports themselves, working at that level. Does that answer your question? You sure? Okay. All right.
Only sort of.
Well, because we don't.
But let's do it on mic, because they have.
We need a microphone over here?
Because they can't hear.
Yeah, the team can.
I only sort of understood that. So right now, the reports, we'll work with the dean on we'll work on the reports, work collaboratively with the dean, and then when it goes forward, does it go through the dean, or does it go directly to the reviewing body?
We're still determining that. We have to have more discussion amongst the full task force and some of the subcommittees before we formally decide what the process will look like on that aspect. On that note, though, we encourage you to collaborate with whoever you think would be helpful in writing your report, whether that's other program or service heads, your dean, your vice president, whatever it is, you're encouraged to collaborate with whoever you'd like, excluding task force members, I suppose.
I'm Gloria Phillip, Disability Services for Students. And the thing is, I have a question about the criteria that's being developed for this. And my question is, for academic programs and also service programs, there is quite a difference between them at the university. Service programs are in support of academic programs, and I'm wondering if we're going to have criteria that is a one-size-fits-all criteria, or whether a criteria will be developed so that these academic support programs can be evaluated on their own merit.
So we've developed separate criteria for academic programs and administrative services or units. So the administrative services or unit criteria is specific to admin units. That we recognize that they are very different in their nature, and so as a result, we developed those.
Gloria, I would also add that the administrative services, finding that those specific criteria has been a difficult process, and Dickinson even shares that as well, that it's not visibly out there as much as it is for the academic programs. So when these are posted next week and they're available online, it is really important for all of you and everybody else you know to share with everyone your feedback. So if we're missing something, we need to be made aware of what that is, especially for the administrative services. It needs to be both sides, obviously, but we do need that feedback for sure.
Still on Julia and Kevin's question. Because we've talked to the deans about, and the sector heads about their role in this process and what they're interested in, and the provost has given us a lot of guidance and feedback as well. So if anyone has thoughts on the roles of their immediate supervisors and how this is going to flow through from the units to APASP and what that interaction in between is going to be, please send us that feedback, because we haven't actually heard from all of you yet on this particular issue. Now I'm done with it.
Well, I'm not. I think, I mean, this is a part of a discussion, so obviously we're really thinking about this from a lot of perspectives. And one of the perspectives that I think is valuable to at least keep into consideration is that as this process is currently structured, the individual units will have submitted reports on their units or programs within their units. There are collective units and programs within larger units, as, for example, schools and colleges. And my thinking, and I think thinking of deans and some of the other sector heads, is there is an advantage to having a role yet to be delineated for individuals who have leadership responsibility over multiple units to provide feedback that kind of is not addressing any individual unit per se, but talks about the totality of it. That, I think, is the issue. The question of how to do that or when to do it and all of that. But I think there's a kind of a perspective that can be added and information, for example, that a unit head might know that would be helpful to either embellish or clarify something a unit has either not quite addressed and has an impact for other units. So I think that's a part of the perspective, but we still have to have a kind of a continued discussion, and I do agree with John, you know, your feedback on this, on how to do that and be able to capture, for example, you know, the school and college as a whole and how it should be, the units in it would be impacted by any decision, I think is an important consideration.
Just generally speaking, do you have an anticipated burden of time for how long you think it would take, you know, as we kind of decide who's going to be, how many people will need to be involved in completing one of these reports?
So to clarify, are you asking how long it will take to write the report?
Yeah, I mean, like, just in general, I mean, a lot of times you'll get, grants will say you can anticipate, 10 hours as burden of time. Do you have any idea how long?
Oh, the burden of time. We don't have, no, that will be hopefully determined by the pilot as to how much time you can expect to pour into this, and that's something we might want to add to our feedback forms. I think as far as time allotted, we've given you just about 5 weeks to write those.
But you don't really have an idea yet how long it will take.
Not set in
It's a big
stone.
old no.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, we've been asked to describe the word limit. Many of the questions have a 150-word limit, some have a 250-word limit. And amongst the different, on the academic side, there's 6 different criteria, and each of those has sub-questions. So you may be answering somewhere, roughly speaking, between 15 to 18 questions with word limits between 150 to 250 in terms of the qualitative. And all the data should come centrally. You'll be able to look at that data and comment on that data, but all that data should be provided to you.
This is Julia, School of Art. This is sort of an odd question, so if you don't want to answer it, that is fine. But this is such a beast of a project or event, and I'm wondering what you guys are most worried about or have the most anxiety about, and what areas you feel like, okay, we got this.
I'll take that one. We're worried about the time that we have to analyze all the reports. Quite frankly, we want it to be a thorough and fair and mechanistically transparent as possible for us. And we're all concerned about the fact of what our workload is going to be on top of our usual jobs. And this is in the fall. It's all contained in one semester, and actually even part of one semester, because the reports aren't due until October, and then our reports are due the end of or middle of November. So we're quite frankly concerned about how are we as individuals going to manage our time.
And I'll add that from my perspective as provost, and I think from a cabinet level perspective too, my worry is that as I see the tremendous amount of commitment and work being done by these individuals, I mean, and I'm not overstating that, because the documents that you see, the documents that you will be seeing forthcoming really reflect some real thought. And, if you go to some of the subcommittee meetings, these are not shrinking violets about their opinions and how to do this. So I am convinced that there's a lot of energy in this. My concern is that the level of analysis produces recommendations that are actionable at the cabinet level, and that we make sure that we do what is in the best interest of the university. Now, we do understand, of course, that FY19 has some challenges for us that are floating out there that we understand in terms of budget issues. We don't know anything about that specificity, but if you ask for me, my biggest worry is that we are calibrating our process so that we put ourselves in the best situation for FY19 as we can be, in a very thoughtful way, and not in the way that we've unfortunately had to react in the past.
Sean Grove with the Vet's Office. This is more of a question to give everyone peace of mind, because I like the question, how do you guys feel? So not only do I work at the Vet's Office, but I'm also a student using V-Education benefits, so I cannot process my own paperwork. What do you guys have in place for not analyzing your own programs?
So we are very aware that there is a conflict of interest statement that we are going to have to declare our conflicts of interest ahead of time and not be responsible for analyzing any program or service that we have a conflict of interest with. And that's going off of both the university statement of what a conflict of interest is, but also our own personal feelings. I'll give you a prime example. My daughter graduated from the music program. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to be one of the people analyzing the music program's report.
And FYI, that draft is going to come out in next week's communication as well. So please take a look at that draft and see kind of what we're trying to do with that. Good question.
So this is Corey Cleveland again. So it sounds like much of what we're going to be using to write our reports is generate data that's generated somewhere by someone. And I guess I'm wondering, who are you pointing at?
Her right there in the green shirt.
Okay, done. This is not meant to be a critique of you, but I guess my question is, sometimes the way that the university may organize data may be slightly different than the way we organize data in faculty. And so I'm wondering if when we get the data, if there will be an opportunity for us to provide some feedback on that or check it or, essentially to try and reconcile it with other numbers that we may have.
So do I get to answer that one? So you'll notice on the timeline, the month of July is a time period for you to negotiate with us how we put the data together. We're putting together a website where you're going to be able to go out there, interact with the data, slice and dice it how you think, provide us comments and all that, and we'll work through the month of July. July 31st is when we will say this is the data that's going in the report. So the answer to your question is absolutely yes. So we can collaborate on that. Yep.
And in the form, you'll have the opportunity to comment on the data that's been populated prior to you receiving the form. For academic programs, for administrative services and units, it's kind of a different story. There's no good centralized data necessarily for the administrative side of things, so we're still kind of working out the details of that, but right now our criteria assumes that each administrative service will identify their own benchmarks and compare themselves to that.
And I also wanted to add that my office has been working since like January to try and clean up data, make certain that what is stored in Banner represents what we really want, address some of this issue where I think I've got this program, but really the system thinks I have this program, those types of things. There are a couple of the metrics that are going to be on the APASP that we've already gone through, and I feel pretty good, match your expectations, so then we'll be able to spend July doing those other ones and cleaning things up. But the bottom line is this has to be collaborative. This is not central saying this is your data, deal with it. We need to find out what's been working, what hasn't been working. And that's true for the administrative services as well, because you guys are going to get an FTE number that we believe you've had, as well as the expenses, all funds that have come out of your area. So there's going to be opportunities for interaction with that central data.
Larry Abramson with journalism. So maybe you just answered this question, but we're doing our self-study now, and I know I've sent countless individual emails to Pope. How many minority students graduated with a Pell Grant in 2015, really specific. So is it your anticipation that everything will be posted somewhere and we can call from it, or have you anticipated having to deal with individual requests from dozens and dozens of programs? And the second question, which can go with this, is this going to be an online form, or is it going to be a piece of paper?
So I can address both of those if it's okay with the task force. So the first question in terms of the data being online and available is yes, we have just recently purchased Tableau. You'll be able to get in, see the information on Tableau, and you'll be able to kind of do filters and drill down to the data however you want, with a caveat that we're focusing on the criteria that the APAS committee needs right now, and we're not getting into the Pell Grant numbers and all of those type things. But that is a long-term vision. That's why we purchased Tableau. There is going to be a website out there where everybody's going to be able to get the central approved data, slice and dice it. Once we get past APAS, we'll be able to build on this. In terms of the form, the answer to that question is yes. We've been working with Central IT. The idea is that the form will be through some kind of technology. It will be able to pre-populate with a lot of the information, i.e. these are the programs you're responsible for, for, this is the department that you're in, this is the data that's specific for the report you have to write. All of that will pre-populate into where you'll just go onto the website and have to answer those 15 to 18 questions that we've talked about. Does that answer yours?
This is Chad Bishop, Wildlife Biology. So this is just a follow-up to that. So we can only keep so much data centrally. So is it understood that any data that's bottom-up then, that might not be part of the central data, would be considered qualitative in its analysis? Did I hear that? Okay. And then how that qualitative data will be evaluated across programs is what we'll have a chance to comment on in July. Is that right? Okay.
The rubrics will let you know how that you're expected to use that data. And then therefore, once again, if you look at that in July and you look at the forms and there are some issues or some comments, we'd really appreciate your feedback so that by the time we get through the comment period in July and the pilot program period, we'll have a really solid mechanism moving forward for both the reports and the analysis.
So, does this mean if we have 15 to 18 questions for each program, does that mean I have to do that for every single language? I'm just kind of wondering what is coming down the pike for me.
So it's based on the individual academic program. So I know for a lot of the languages in MCLL, well, not a lot of them, but a good number of them are standalone minders. So that program chair or program head would be filling out that specific report. It'd be the individual that's most involved with that program, and that would be best equipped to fill them out.
I'd say specifically to yours, the answer is probably yes, that you may have a large number of reports where the two co-chairs are listed as the one now is listed as the person responsible for the report. I hope you can assign those as you see appropriate. Or get,
on the task force, right?
yes, but there is onus on the task force. We will have, this is why we are encouraged.
I think she said my name.
Oh, no, sorry.
Not the
I
word
thought you said
onus.
onus.
That has happened before.
I was like, yeah, that's an onus on the task force, sorry.
Yes, yes. There are other members of the task force who will be authors as well, like Liz. So, yeah, I was going under the assumption that each language section head would be an author. Mm-hmm. That you would not be doing 15 or however many. Yeah. 8.
And the list of programs and services we have right now each have a contact person, perhaps 2, but right now we don't know if those contact individuals are the correct individual for the program or unit. So that giant list will be sent out to all of you. Right now it's being sent out to VPs and deans, but there will be an opportunity to correct who the individual is on that big spreadsheet so that the right person is filling out those forms.
We have scheduled this till 1:30, and of course, trying to ensure we had ample time to answer your questions, but we don't want to belabor this. We do have another scheduled forum tomorrow at 10, say it again, 10 to 11:30 in this room. So I just want you to know that, you know, we're still open for questions now, but I don't want us to just simply feel like, okay, we got to sit here till 1:30 because that's what time we scheduled it for. And I don't also, at the same time, I don't want somebody who's thinking about how to even word it feel that if they don't speak up in the next, few minutes, that they won't have an opportunity to do so. Because even if you aren't able to come and bring that question tomorrow, we still receive questions on the website, so there's plenty of opportunity for you to get your questions out. So, again, other questions, we're happy to entertain if you have those. Okay, thank you very much.